I made one of the most disgusting things ever. My sister had made some sort of baked chicken legs where the skin had gotten all crispy and she had put some sort of Italian dressing on it. I was younger and I tried to, mimic that, and it just wasn't cooking. I don't remember what temperature I put it in at. And for some reason, I got the idea that I should add milk.
Whoa. You're listening to the Taste Podcast. I'm Editor-in-Chief Matt Rodbard, here with Senior Editor Anna Hezel.
Today on the show, we have Anita Lo, New York City chef and the author of a new book, Solo, a modern cookbook for a party of one. Also on the show, we have Matt Sartwell of New York City cookbook store Kitchen, Arts, and Letters, talking about the new season. But first, Matt, what did you and Anita talk about?
We talk about Anita Lo's very unique and special place in the New York City restaurant scene. She's a mentor, she's a leading light, but she's also one of New York's finest chefs, and she ran this restaurant, Annisa, for years. We also talked about her latest book, Solo, which is cool. It's about cooking for one and how, there's lots of fun in actually cooking for one. It isn't all a big bummer.
Chefs don't get to do it that much either.
No, not at all. And she also tells a lot of really cool stories in the head notes, and I think it's a cool book.
Here's Matt talking to Anita.
Hi.
Hey.
So great to have you at Bookstore Magic. I love this store. I've known you for a decade in the industry, maybe even longer, and you're just a connector, and you foster relationships with all sorts of chefs, men, women, gay, straight, et cetera, et cetera. You foster this vibe of just nurturing. How did you get into that position? And you can disagree with me too, of course, but but I just feel
Mama
like
Lo, yeah.
I didn't say that. Okay, I wasn't going there, but.
Yeah, I think owning a restaurant necessarily makes you someone who brings people together. You're creating community. I really found my community through the restaurant. Just even the community of chefs around the planet even has been wonderful.
I want to start. I'm going to go back to your beginnings in Birmingham, Michigan. Because I'm from Kalamazoo. My sister lives near Birmingham currently. Did you, as a youngster growing up, did you embrace Detroit's kind of diverse food scene? Were you dining out in all the restaurants that the Detroit inner city and the suburbs have to offer?
We did, and we also went, across the border into Canada to, have like really
straight Canada, nice.
Canada, yeah.
We don't
it
talk
was right there.
Yeah. Windsor.
Yeah, Windsor. There was like some of the best Chinese food you could have there. There was a little French restaurant that we used to go to. I want to say it was called Le Bistro or something like that. But it was, but I remember loving that restaurant. So, and downtown, I remember having Italian tripe when I was young, and it was it was just the best tripe I'd ever had.
Like you're 8 or 10 or younger.
Yeah, I was young.
Yeah.
I was young, yeah. My parents took me there, yes.
So your parents really, it sounds like they fostered this environment of food. It's clear.
Yeah, they were food obsessed, certainly. Yeah.
Were they cooking as well? I mean, what was that like growing up?
Yeah, my mom was a great cook. Both my parents worked, so we had various nannies from different backgrounds cook for us as well. So we had like lots of different types of cuisines. I think my stepfather cooked once, and that wasn't a good. That was only one time. So.
I mean, tell me, going back, like what was like your first dish that you actually made for your family? Like what's a memory of early cooking for yourself?
Oh my God, I made one of the most disgusting things ever. It was my sister had made some sort of baked chicken legs where the skin had gotten all crispy, and she had put some sort of Italian dressing on it.
Which is not a bad thing fundamentally, right? Putting Italian dressing.
Right. I was younger and I tried to, mimic that, and it just wasn't cooking. I don't remember what temperature I put it in at. And for some reason, I got the idea that I should add milk.
Whoa. Midwest, I guess, in a way.
Oh, right, exactly.
We drank a lot of milk growing up, right? I don't really drink as much milk as I do.
God, yeah. I see people, like older people in the Midwest drinking milk with their dinner. I'm like, ooh.
Ooh. It's like milk and wine, 2 glasses. I've seen that. Yeah.
Right.
But you ended up, we'll jump around a little bit of the narrative, but like you made it to France though, right? Like after university, you ended up in France. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I was studying French in college. So.
In college. And then is that where you started cooking professionally, or at least learning the professional craft of cooking?
Exactly. Yeah. I ended up in cooking school the summer after my junior year in Paris. Okay. So, yeah.
Which I think leads to the book, Solo. The book is really unique in that it each head note, which is the text before the recipe, is a story. There's often a memory of travel or a memory of your restaurants. But tell me, let's go back to the days in France. I mean, what are some of the recipes in the book that are informed by these early days of your cooking career?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a braised short rib, and that takes a little bit longer, but the prep time is very minimal, actually. That's very French. That comes with a caramelized, glazed piece of endive. Mm-hmm. That's very French cooking school. And I love those flavors. There's also a salad in there that was, you could pretty much get in any of the, in any of the little cafes around. Yeah. The cafes even, where you just go and have a drink. They would have, I guess they were bistros, but they seem, from the outside, they look like predominantly cafes.
Good. Yeah. You're very French in correcting me the difference between bistro and cafe. I appreciate it.
Sorry.
No, it's...
I'm a chef. I'm a little bit neurotic.
No, and I try to write precisely and speak precisely. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But why write about dining and cooking and being solo? It's when I saw this months ago in the list of books coming out, I was like, that's a really interesting idea. It hasn't really been done.
It has been done. It's just there aren't a lot of cookbooks out there that have been written for one, but there's certainly Joe Yonan has written a couple. I'm drawing a blank. What is her name?
Judith Jones had her book.
Had one,
and there's like Microwave Cooking for One, which is a big gag book. That book is kind of a funny joke. You can buy it for a friend. Yeah. But I think yours is like a modern book from a chef. I mean, this is kind of a unique element, though.
Yeah, actually, I told some chefs at an event the other day, and they laughed at me. I was like, I'm ready to go for one, and they all just broke out laughing. I was like, okay, fine. It's selling really well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Like that. Good one. Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there, but we'll keep it. But wouldn't it be actually more pragmatic for a chef? Because a lot of chefs do cook for one after shift at home if you are making food at home, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us probably aren't cooking at home after, we're picking up something on the way home, or we're picking food all night on the line. And then we eat staff meal as well. So, yeah.
What makes a great solo meal then?
I think a great solo meal is it fills your need at that moment. So it should fill your time needs as far as how much time you want to be spending in the kitchen cooking, which could be, sometimes I want to spend, several hours just to have that meditative cooking experience. Sometimes I just want to get it on the table as fast as possible. It should also fill all of your craving needs. And, I think it should be balanced if possible.
But sometimes not. Sometimes super decadent.
Not.
Sometimes super decadent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which I love.
Well, have a salad with it. If you're going to have mac and cheese, maybe have a salad.
Love it.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting story about the last date you had with an Icelandic artist. She said she was quite the artist. She was beautiful, but she made amazing sculptures.
Oh, yeah. She was. I fell so hard for this woman. We dated for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks, yeah. We had... Yeah, it's like, I will have your babies. Calling the U-Haul right now. It's terrible.
Can I back up? This is a head note for a recipe: Arctic char and a shower of skyr, which Icelandic yogurt. Skyr.
Yeah, and Arctic char is all comes from Iceland as well.
Okay, so the context is this is the head note that I read. So continue your story.
Okay, yeah, and the recipe actually is not that great of a recipe, but I wanted to include this story. So on our last date, it's been 2 weeks, and she says, "Okay, meet me in Riverside Park." And so we're walking up the park, and we're talking, and ambling, and she's picking up like things to use in her art, and suddenly she's like, "Do you see that?" And it's basically like a dead body. It was like a head.
Basically, it is
a
dead body.
Head body. Yes, thank you for correcting me.
You see a dead body floating in the Hudson River.
Yes. Oh God, it was horrible, and it was floating upstream. So I was like, "Oh my God, what are we gonna do?" And so I called 911, and at the same time, like I'm talking to 911, we have to follow it up the river because we don't want to like lose it because it's slowly moving up with the tide. And I'm talking to the EMT. They keep on changing from the EMT to the fire department to the police department, and everyone wants to know where we are. It's like it's like, give me your cross street. We're in the park. I don't know what cross street we're at. I'm like, and so finally, after about a half an hour of this. We get all the way up to like the end of the park. They come and meet us, and they find them, and then and apparently the guy had committed suicide, and they never found the body. But then we go for dinner, and this is like those.
Where did you go? Do you remember?
Somewhere in Harlem. Oh, we went to what's the Miss Amy Ruth? Because we're up in Harlem at this point. We walk all around Harlem. We go to a couple of like Senegalese grocery stores and stuff like that. This is the longest date ever. I think it was maybe 8 to 10 hours worth of date.
Yeah.
And at the end of this, and then and somebody died, and then at the end of this, we're getting ready to I was like, I'm thinking that I'm going to get invited back to her apartment, which is also on the Upper West Side. And, she says, I think we really should just be friends. I don't want to date you anymore.
Oh, man.
And I was so crushed. And so I had this, that Valentine's Day, I always had something for the lonely person.
It's a Valentine's Day recipe.
So on the Annisa Valentine's Day menu we had, and you always have to do a special menu because it's a big seller and et cetera. So I did a version of that, which was the... Yeah, hot dates. It was Icelandic char with hot dates, which were wrapped in bacon and baked, and then with a shower of skyr. I did a Bobby flay.
I like the shower of skyr. It's good. Let's talk about your restaurants. You opened in 2000, right? You've opened,
Yep.
2000. So let's just first talk about like the difference in opening in New York in 2000 versus like almost 20 years later, 2018.
Completely different scene. Yeah.
Like, there's so much to talk about. But you've such perspective. Like, let's share some of the differences right now. What was it like opening in 2000? Like, what was the most important media? What were you focusing on?
Well, we had the most important media was the New York Times. That we weren't looking at anything else. We wanted that New York Times review. There were a lot of chefs just starting to open their own personal restaurants, smaller. Upscale yet casual, which was like, Dufresne was opening his place. Dan Barber had just opened Blue Hill, etc. There were a lot more cooks. There are no cooks anymore. Or there are just too many restaurants. I'm not quite sure.
Is that what is the cause? Is it people don't want to do it, or is it just too many restaurants?
I am not sure. I actually think part of it is that no cook can afford to live in New York City, so everyone's fleeing. I would flee. Yeah,
but you haven't, thankfully.
Well, no, I love New York, but then I'm not a cook anymore. So
yeah. In terms of rent, let's talk about that. How much has it gone up?
Oh, it's ridiculous. Like, I live in the West Village, which is, fancy. But, Bleecker Street there's so many empty stores. Like, there's this little tiny restaurant that I was like, oh, God. My partner is also a chef, and I was like, that would be a great place for you. And it had, like, a wood-burning oven. And, it only sat maybe, 40 seats, and it's sort of more cramped. They wanted $25,000 a month for that.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Which place is that?
That was
what space?
It used to be August.
Yes, the August space. That's what I thought. That's like one of the few wood-burning ovens in the downtown area.
Yeah. Yeah.
They wanted $25K for that?
$25K.
Yeah,
it's like, well,
crazy.
that's not a restaurant then. That's, yeah. I mean, I don't even know how you can sell retail, Marc Jacobs, how do they make money? I don't, they sell a lot of boots, I guess. Yeah.
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 Yeah, $25K for August. What was your first rent at Annisa round?
That started, I don't remember, but I think it started at like $8K or something like that. Yeah.
It's not that long ago. It's just the city is.
Yeah. So everyone's doing fast casual now.
Yeah.
Or I think there's a lot of places that are doing, really high end, just a counter, and then so you can charge, $250, $300 a head, and and that model seems to work better because there's less,
Does that excite you as a chef? That style?
Well, not really. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I love eating, getting that sort of personal attention from a chef, but I personally can't do it anymore. I had, I literally worked myself to the bone. My knee just I ground away all the cartilage and had to replace it, and it hasn't been that successful. So, yeah.
I mean, outside of the physical, your physical condition, do you miss cooking? Do you miss working in a restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things I miss about it. I don't. Yeah, but overall, I think I made the right decision. I'm happier. I think.
Good.
Yeah.
But is there one thing you miss?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I miss having. I miss cooking and having someone clean after me. That's awesome. Yeah. I miss all of my little, microgreens. I miss having like that entire, having that big walk-in refrigerator was kind of awesome. Yeah.
I mean, let me just be straight up. You're so modest, but Annisa was an amazing restaurant.
Oh,
it was an amazing. I think there's so many fans in here, and we miss having you, and we miss that restaurant, like for real.
Oh, thank you so much.
So I hope at some point you will be cooking again in some way.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get.
So there's a round of applause in the back. I like hearing that. Yeah.
I'm hoping to.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping to get some sort of long-term consulting gig where, like the boys do, where you go in and you set it up and you make sure it's running well, and then you just sort of check in every once in a while. That's something that my body could handle, at least. Yeah.
You refer to Annisa in the present tense in the cookbook, though.
Well, it's because I wrote it when we still had it.
Is that what it was? I thought it was maybe like a sign of things to come.
Yeah.
Okay, it was just more of the time. When you say the boys, what does that mean exactly? You said the boys.
There's a lot of boy chefs that get those. Like there aren't too many girl chefs that get those deals.
I didn't want to. I wasn't necessarily going to go into that. I don't think I sent you that in the question prep, the gender and the boys. But how are you feeling right now about the boys in the industry? Keep it very vague and very open.
That's a really that's a Pandora's box right there. Yeah. You really want me to go there?
I do, actually. I think some people in the room would like you to.
Yeah,
How are you feeling right now?
Yeah.
How are you feeling about your industry that you've really fostered all these relationships? That's the first question I asked.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's high time that we've had this reckoning, and it's nothing's been solved. That we still have a lot of work to do. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think we should be patting ourselves on the back anytime soon.
I mean, did you witness a lot of abuse in the kitchens?
Of course. It was, that's what it was, it was just, especially when you grow up in the French system, it's like a military, Yeah. And then that, the sexual harassment is something that, I would assume happens in, every industry. I think it's particularly bad in restaurants, just because that's been the culture. And that culture needs to change, which I think some people are opening restaurants that do treat their employees better, and that's those are men and women that are doing that. So we just need more of them, and we need that across the board now.
Should we be protesting with our pocketbook? Should we be not going to these restaurants when you hear about even the faintest rumor or the faintest mention or questionable behavior about maybe taking over a restaurant from a previous harasser, even though the person taking over hasn't necessarily done anything physically wrong?
You're talking about the spotted pig.
Yes, I am talking about the spotted pig. That was a more dramatic effect, but you brought it up. I mean, okay, so should I go to Prune? I mean, should I support Should I support that chef because of this decision that she has backed out of?
I'm not going to go there, but I don't think anyone should have gone to. I think it was. I think that was the morally wrong decision to go and to try to reopen or try to keep the Spotted Pig open. I think the name the Spotted Pig is a problem. There's a place that they call the rape room there. I mean, you can't. That shouldn't keep. Yeah, no, I don't think we should. I don't think anyone should eat there. And I certainly didn't think Gabrielle should have gone. And she knows this. I talked to her about it.
Yeah, okay, you guys
we're friendly. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, what does that say to all the people, all the victims of sexual harassment, of sexual assault across the world? And that's horrible to me. I can't get past that. Yeah.
I'm going to paraphrase Helen Rosner on Twitter. Close the damn restaurant. Well, thank you for going there. I want to be organic. I'm glad we talked about it. It's a big part of.
You were like, come on.
wasn't trying to go there. But let's talk more about solo dining. I mean, is this something that I know you're in a relationship now? You write about this in the book, right? Am I correct?
Sorry? Yes,
you're
I'm
in a relationship.
Yeah.
I know, like, books are printed and things change. So, but do you still find cooking for yourself therapeutic in a way? Do you still do it quite often, or infrequently?
Well, yeah, actually now, I mean, my girlfriend just went back to work full time, and she's often not home for dinner. Yeah, and so there's certain things that she doesn't really like that I really like, that I'll make for myself, and and that's satisfying. Yeah,
I agree. It is satisfying to cook for yourself, and cook the food you really want to.
Yeah, and you feel like you've accomplished something, and then
and you have leftovers. Shit, right?
If you want them.
Okay, if you want them.
Yeah. So I guess apparently a couple of people have been complaining that there's no leftovers in my book, and I was like, well, multiply by 3 or 4, or however many times you want to have leftovers.
Well, I'm going to close it. Solo's the book, and thank you so much, Anita. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Here's Matt with Matt Sartwell of New York City cookbook store Kitchen Arts and Letters.
Matt Sartwell, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I've been a customer at Kitchen Arts and Letters since I think 2003. I moved here in 2002, so I only had a year where I didn't know of your existence.
Well, we're glad to have you a part of it. As a small business, you're always learning that you have to keep getting the word out, and you think you've saturated the market, and you never have.
And I wanted to ask you to come in to talk about the fall season, which is typically the big season for cookbooks. But first, just tell me, why do you love cookbooks?
I love cookbooks for the most part because they end up being another way to tell a story. I think that's one of the most important things that books do for people. And cookbooks can tell a personal story, a cultural story, a historical story, sometimes all three of them together in very intimate and interesting and intricate ways. And if you're talking about food, which is something that you engage in every day, for the most part, then you're telling something about yourself and about the place that you've come from and the place that you're in. And there can be cookbooks that are extremely practical. How do I bake something that's gluten-free? But most books go beyond that, and they tell you something about why it is that somebody's excited to be in the kitchen. And if you can pick up some of that enthusiasm, some of that insight, then I think your life is richer.
Absolutely agree. It aligns what we do at Taste. We think of food as a way of learning about culture and other people who maybe we're not aware of. That said, what do you think of all these instant pot cookbooks that have been flooding the market? They're not quite achieving what you just said.
No, I don't think that's their goal. I came down early and hard against the number of Instapot books in this season. I think when my count exceeded 45, I really let the hammer fall. I'm carrying 2, and they're both by Melissa Clark because I know and trust her. And I'm sure there are other nice ones out there, but that's been completely adequate to our needs. Publishers are always obliged to chase a certain number of trends. They have to pile up money on sort of quick and fast projects in order to take more interesting risks as more unusual books come down the road. So I'm happy to let somebody else handle selling all those books. I mean, you can go to Costco. You can buy them when you order, your toilet paper online.
On a website we will not mention.
On many websites that we won't mention. But so they're making people happy. Some of them are coming out of cultures where, like Indian food, where pressure cookers have actually a long-standing role and are, and make a lot of sense. Others are clearly exploitative, and it's just easiest for me not to have my hand in that.
Well said, diplomatic, and I appreciate the sentiment. The Kitchen Arts and Letters opened in 1983. You started working there in 1991, but just give me a little sense of the history of the store. Why did it open in 83, and really was it always focused on cookbooks?
Well, yes. Food and drink has always been the focus. Knock Waxman founded the store in 1983. He'd been an editor for many years with HarperCollins and then with Crown Books primarily. And Knock wanted to work for himself. And a bookstore seemed to be a great way to do that. It meant being able to talk about things he loved all day long. And he was looking for a specialty area that had a devoted and dedicated audience and that fit with his own interests. So it was either food and drink or sports. And he weighed them in the balance and decided that more people made their living from food and drink, and he would have a steadier clientele base.
Meaning chefs would be customers, food professionals would be customers.
Chefs, caterers, journalists, food historians, which were at that point really an emerging category. There weren't a lot of them, or at least not a lot who were being taken seriously. And that was the audience he decided he wanted to serve. I mean, I think he would have been delighted to talk about baseball with people all year round, but food was pretty close to his heart. Knock had been a Southeast Asian studies major in college, so that kind of anthropological approach to looking at a subject was also near and dear to his heart. So he opened up in the building that we're still in, although in a smaller space. It was about half the size of what we are.
And where is that exactly?
We're at 1435 Lexington, which is between 93rd and 94th on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And we're in an apartment building where the people who run the co-op board love us. So it's been a real boon to us in the age of soaring Manhattan rents that we're loved by our neighbors.
Oh, that's such a good thing. I had no idea that you had that sense of community with your landlord.
Yes, it's given all the stories you hear about people in New York having their rents jacked up, we've been extremely fortunate.
I feel Bonnie Slotnick got a similar deal for a new shop in the East Village too.
Yeah, she got really badly shafted by her old landlord, and she found somebody who was delighted to have her there. And that makes all the difference to a business that is less about turning everything over as quickly possible and more about making people happy when they come in the door.
And also serving a purpose for the professionals in search of these out-of-print books. I mean, it's nice to have a community, but you really are serving a purpose for a very specific profession, which is food professionals.
And you want someone to come in not to feel the pressure of buy. I have to make a sale to you today. So in a place like a bookstore where people want to come in and ask questions as much as they want to necessarily shop, not having to make a giant rent not every month is helpful.
Julia Child and James Beard were famous customers. I think Anthony Bourdain mentioned it often as one of his stores. Do you have any memories of these famous customers?
Well, my experiences with Julia were entirely limited to the telephone. And I have to say there was still something of a thrill to pick up the phone and hear a voice on the other end sort of fluting away saying, "This is Julia Child." So, but knock, remember the very first time she came in, the store had just gotten a write-up on the Times, and Julia came in and she was sort of fluttering and excited to be there. And she went to the French section. She kicked off her shoes. She sat down on the floor and pulled literally every book on French food that the store had off the shelf. So she had a really delightful time. Beard was mostly a phone customer. He was at the end of his life when the store opened, but he was very supportive and sent a lot of people to us. Barbara Kafka, who was one of his strong disciples, lived in our neighborhood, and she was relaying stories to him and information. Over the years, we've seen a lot of people. Edna Lewis used to come in, really remarkable, striking woman. I mean, even if you had no idea that one of the major American chefs was in the store, she arrested your attention because she had so much presence. And over the years, we've continued to see leading chefs, people like Wiley Dufresne and Dan Barber come in, Alain Ducasse. I remember I was a snowstorm in February, and I was sure nobody was going to come in for hours and hours. And suddenly I looked up, and there was rather incongruously, a man in a cowboy hat who spoke only French. And it took me about 2 minutes to realize that it was Ducasse.
Ducasse, wow.
And we try to keep the store relevant to people at the high professional level, people at the home level. It's a bit of a balancing act. But if you talk to people a little bit, you can learn what they're hoping for and try and find them the right book.
And our chefs coming in, I've heard stories where they'll come in and, maybe they work for a large company and they'll buy maybe 10 books, 15 books if they're focusing on a new dish or a new special or even a new concept.
Yes, that's one of the things we do. Sometimes people call up in advance and say, "Hey, I'm coming in 2 days. Pull out everything you can on this particular thing." I can remember Alex Guarnaschelli came in once and sort of burrowed into a corner of the store, and I spent hours ferrying all kinds of things over to her because she kept reading something and moving on to another idea. And, she left with 4 bags of books. So, it wasn't that she was just hogging my attention.
Of course not. And that's such an amazing part of your store is that you'll have these repeat customers come in and buy massive quantities and not do the easy thing, which is like click, 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 right?
Well, yeah. There's something to be said for actually looking at the book before you make the purchase. And websites are terrific. We have a website. We're happy to sell books that way. But I think when you're looking at a website, you're largely getting a handle on the book as the publisher wants you to think about it, which isn't necessarily the way you need to understand it. You may not, you're asking a question that is tangential, and you have to figure out whether the book does the job. And by spending time with it, you can.
Let's talk about the new season. We're dropping this in December. It's the midst of holiday gifting. It's when a lot of cookbooks are sold. So what are you seeing this fall? What are you liking? What aren't you feeling so much?
This fall is a crazy time. I've been known to rage a little bit about how much gets dumped into the fall.
I love your presence, by the way, on social media and Facebook. I love it. It's so great. It's not rage. It's like polite rage.
Well, I understand that there are people out there writing these books who really don't want to hear them slammed because they've poured their heart into them. But I think publishers as businesses make some decisions that aren't always necessarily in their own best interest. So this fall we have some really amazing, powerful books. So we have the new Renee Redzepi book on fermentation from Noma. This is a technically very complicated book that makes sense for people who are either really into fermentation or who are running a restaurant and need that kind of material. We've sold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies of this book. And that's selling right alongside Yotamata Lengi Simple and the new Ina Garten Cook Like a Pro. And these are all books with incredibly high profiles that have no trouble selling. People just walk in the door. They already know they want.
They ask for it. Where is the new Yotam book?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because those are people who have really established their reputations. What makes it harder in the fall, then, is for people who aren't really well known to get their book out and to get attention. And there are a few things that can sort of rise to the top amidst all the noise. and I don't really mean to call Jutta Maudolenghi and Renee Redzepi noise, but those books like that can suck all the air out of the room in a way. But Nick Sharma, for instance, has a book from Chronicle called Season, which is a really remarkable flavor adventure. He's pulling things out of his Indian childhood. He's drawing on some of what he knows in his training as a scientist, and is also the fact that he now lives in California and he's got access to all these amazing foods, and he's producing really fascinating, flavorful food. It doesn't look like anybody else's book, and that's surprising.
Do you have a soft spot in your heart for debuts, for first-time authors, like trying to give them that little bit of boost that maybe they need, unlike the other authors who maybe have their fourth book coming out?
We do. We always look for something that we can turn people on to, that they might not be seeing, books that might not be getting a lot of attention. And there are some people who we've stuck with all along. Every time a new Diana Henry book comes out, we're behind that really hard. I mean, she's on her 9th book, but from the very first one, Roast Figs, Sugar Snow, we'd fallen in love with her. So we're happy to give that a push. There's so much going on right now, but we still have to take the time to stop with somebody and talk to them and say, who's this for? Is it for you? What do you like? What do you feel like you're not doing? Where do you want to push yourself? And then we can get people closer to a great book.
I know we're not quite in the midst of the holiday season, but have there been any surprises this fall with any successful books that have kind of been a lot of calls that maybe you weren't when you saw the catalog in the summer? You didn't think of?
The funniest thing isn't a cookbook. There is a small paperback by a guy named Joe DiStefano with photographs by Clay Williams called 111 Places in Queens to Know. And it's primarily food. It's a guidebook. It's in the window, and people are coming in all the time to pick it up. I am so excited to see a book like that get attention because it's coming from a small publisher, but it's speaking to something that people wanted to know, even if I hadn't anticipated that it would be anywhere near this big.
What aren't you as hot on? And you'll be diplomatic, I'm sure.
Well, I mean,
you're not going to be diplomatic.
Now I have to be diplomatic.
No, you don't have to be diplomatic, to be clear.
Setting aside the flood of Instant Pot books and the sort of, formulaic check 3 dietary restriction boxes, we're still finding that publishers are looking at where they've succeeded before and repeating. So I get a new Italian book, and it's about Tuscany or Sicily or Rome. There are great books out there on Tuscany and Sicily and Rome, and some of them are quite recent. But if you came in and asked me for a book about Basilicata, I couldn't provide you one. If you came in and asked me for a book about the Alto Adige, or even a book about the food of Milan, which is the biggest city in Italy, the most traveled to place.
And the wealthiest.
And a place with incredibly overlapping culinary traditions. There's nothing from American publishers. If you asked me for a book about famous places like Normandy in France or Alsace, where the food is distinctive and has contributed a lot to American restaurant culture because of chefs who have come from there are no books. And then that says nothing about whole continents, which are largely ignored. So we struggle all the time to find interesting...
Let's keep rolling with this. When you talk about continents, are we thinking about maybe Africa?
Thinking a lot about Africa. There are some bright exceptions. Pierre Thiam's books on Senegal have been brilliant, but why the hell are there no books from a major American publishers on Ethiopian food? And that's a question I've been asking them for 2 decades. So it's not like this is an old, a theme I've just brought up. There are all kinds of parts of the world like that where there are distinct, rich traditions that deserve full-scale explorations, and where I think the food is going to really pay off. I think there's a lot to be said about the food from these places, and because no editors go on vacation there are no books. And it's the same way, find a book in English on Venezuelan food.
Yeah, South America is an absolute blind spot for American publishers. I think it is a language barrier. I believe has a lot to do with travel, and it hasn't. A lot of the countries like Venezuela are not great for tourism right now, and I think we're just not seeing that. But you're getting requests for these books.
Absolutely, all the time.
And so there's demand for an Ethiopian book. Like, you've had calls.
That is probably the biggest area where we have to just tell people, I'm sorry, we don't have anything. There have been a few Ethiopian books independently published in the United States by people of Ethiopian heritage. They last for a time. Some of them are good, but those small self-publishers don't usually stick with a book for a long time. It's a lot of effort to keep a self-published book going, and unless you're making a pile of money at it, eventually you're going to say, I'd rather spend time with my grandchildren.
What about outside of cultures and travel? Are there any technique books that you haven't seen? We've seen the pickling, we've seen certainly sous vide books, but is there a technique that you get calls for that maybe you're not seeing books for?
For the home audience, I would say no. I think great technique books can still come along and find an audience. But it's not as if I would identify a crying hole. There are some specific things in the pastry world where books have been scarce. Until 2 years ago, we didn't have anything recent on the exciting topic of laminated doughs, which sounds esoteric, but if you've ever enjoyed a croissant, you really appreciate somebody who knows how to make a laminated dough. Somebody called the other day and asked for books on chocolate panning, which is the process by which things are tumbled for a long time in a chocolate coating so that you get a very round, smooth surface around, say, a nut. And there are no books on that. I'm not saying that every publisher in town should charge out and do something like that, but there are areas where technical expertise is useful, and somebody could really somebody who knows what they're talking about could do really well. I'm not suggesting that somebody should just say, "Oh, I could write a book on chocolate panning. Let me find out about that."
What about rare and out of print books? Is there just this one book that you've been trying to get your hands on for decades, for years?
The mythical book that I think I was asked for the first week I worked in the store that I've still never seen, and we know it exists because we've seen photographs of it, and this will sound like it's completely out of left field, is the Johnny Mathis cookbook. And there are people out there who are desperate for this book. They're Mathis fans, I think, more than cookbook people. But it's incredibly elusive. That's been the real hard one. There are other things that come up all the time. People are still looking for Claudia Fleming's The Last Course, a book that has a sort of a legendary reputation. A lot of the really hard things are things that nobody asks for again, so they don't stand out quite as much. Knock does most of the work searching for the out-of-print books. That's his area.
But you field the calls. I'm sure you get a ton of calls for these books.
Yeah, and often people are looking not for something that is rare in the fine collector's sense, but it's something that has emotional significance to them. It was a book that was part of their childhood. And sometimes they don't even really know exactly what it was. They can remember the color and the size and a couple of recipes that were in it. And we can sometimes work with that. We try really hard to do that. So there was an instance a few years ago where two sisters came in. They wanted this book that their mother had, and they were fighting about what the title was. But they knew when their mother had gotten married, and they knew a couple of the dishes in it. And fortunately, it turned out to have been one of the major cookbooks from the early 50s, I guess it was. And we were able to pull out 4 or 5 different books and narrow down to the one.
That's so amazing. I mean, what's your process to find these books? I mean, oftentimes you probably have customers who aren't as online savvy, so do you check Abe for certain books?
These were books that we had in the store.
You had in the store?
We had them in the store. We have a very extensive selection in the basement. It's not browsable because the condition of many of the books is not such that we want people pulling them off the shelf.
I see.
And so forth. But in this case, we were able... Knock went to the basement. He pulled, came back up with a couple of armfuls of books, and we sat down and looked through them with them there, and we found the book. And it was a And I'm not going to be able to remember the title at this point, but it was a book that was not one of the like really dominant books of the era, but it had been fairly popular in its time. So we were lucky that it was something that we were likely to have on.
Such a wonderful experience just to go to your store and have that moment where you're having books shown to you. It's such a rarity in our world.
We love that. I mean, people come in sometimes and say, show me something I haven't seen before. And the risk in that situation is that we're going to drown them. Because we can, start in one corner and start pulling. And whether it's something that's older, or something that comes from a faraway location. We have a book in the store that comes from a region in India called Ladakh, which is at the base of the Himalayas. It's a place where there's been a lot of recent internal immigration within India, and the local foodways are being overwhelmed by foodways from elsewhere. So this book was written to preserve a lot of traditions specific to this valley.
That's so invaluable.
And, in another 20 years, are those foodways going to exist? It's too early to tell, but we have this book.
You have the book. So is the cookbook business healthy right now? Would you color it that?
I think it is. There's a lot of up and downs in all kinds of parts of the publishing business. And I think one thing that gets forgotten is that there are sort of two broad types of cookbook buyers. Those people who buy a cookbook once a year as a gift for someone else, and they're not really serious about it. And then there are people who are in the market year-round, who are always paying attention and so forth. That audience is steady and strong. I think they're always looking for something new and fresh. There is that audience that, buys a gift for their aunt or uncle or girlfriend or boyfriend who looks for a name that they recognize, and name recognition may be all that's necessary. But we're in an era where recipes are free. You can go online and type in...
There's too many recipes, probably.
Well, there are too many disconnected recipes.
Good call.
You can go in and, type in blanquette de veau or lemon bars and come up with lots of recipes from them. But you don't necessarily know anything about the person whose providing the recipe. Have they ever eaten blanquette de veau in France? Do they care about its relationship to traditional preparation, or do they want it to be ready in 20 minutes? And
that's not happened in 20 minutes.
Probably not. No, but maybe with some cream of mushroom soup. There's probably somebody out there who's tried. And so when you buy a book, you're getting a lot of knowledge about the person who's presenting you this material, and they're telling you how they've gotten to the point where they know enough to write this recipe for you. And a book that doesn't deliver some of that story, a book that doesn't make you a promise essentially, and show you how it's trying to deliver that, is probably not going to be a successful book. And the astute writers that we have today are giving you a story of some kind. They're drawing you in, they're helping you along. So whether it's, Julia Turshen talking in her books about how she cooks for her wife and how making her wife happy is a big part of making herself happy in the kitchen, that's a story that you understand that this is part of a happy home, and good food can make for a great table conversation and a great evening after a hectic day. Or it's Naomi Dogood going off and talking about Persian food, but saying, hey, it's not just Iran, but it's Azerbaijan and Armenia and Georgia, which share so many different influences and similarities in geography and culture and agriculture. And that book is giving you something other than the recipes. And so as writers get smarter that way, I think they keep opening the world up for cookbooks, and I don't think they're in danger.
God, Beyond the Great Wall is like one of my favorite books.
Yeah, because there's still no great coverage on that part of China.
Matt Sartwell, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
The Taste podcast is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Anna Heasel. The show is produced by Gabrielle Lewis, studio recordings by Pat Stango, theme music by Steve Rydell. Interviews are recorded live at Bookstore Magic in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, and at Penguin Random House Studios in Manhattan. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com. Thanks for listening.